All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Nebula Music Podcast. I am very excited because today I have Noelle Scaggs from Fitz and the Tantrums joining me on this episode. And if you guys are joining me for the very first time, I enjoy doing this podcast because I get a chance to talk to people that are just killing it in the music industry, whether they're touring musicians, social media musicians, or industry people. I really enjoy sitting down, talking with these people, and just understanding how they approach their career and what they do specifically. And I'm very excited for Noelle because she has made a killing with Fitz and the Tantrums. Not only is she an amazing songwriter, but she is an amazing performer, and it's very rare to see someone be able to combine both to that amount of success. I mean, usually you're really good at one or the other. Not saying that that's a bad thing. It's more so that people tend to gravitate towards one side, and Noelle has managed to combine both flawlessly. And so let's go ahead and dive right into the interview. What's up? I am very excited because today I have someone that I've been a fan of for a long time. I have Noelle Scaggs joining me on the show today. Noelle, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am elated, okay? I know I was telling you this before the show, but I am excited because, well, let me just say this, guys. I know I probably have said it in the description already, but for those of you guys who do not know who Noelle is, you are the singer. You're one of the front runners for this little known band. I'm not sure if anyone's ever even heard of it, called Fitz and the Tantrums. One of the greatest bands in my opinion, and I'm just excited to have you and to be able to speak to you because I'm a huge fan.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Well, normally I like to take just some time to talk about, your career and stuff, but I would much rather hear from you, honestly. And the reality is, guys, Fitz and the Tantrums is a very huge band. One of, personally for me, it really shaped my taste in music a lot when I was in college, especially when your first album came out. And so I'm, again, beyond excited to have you on the show. So Noelle, why don't you just go ahead and just take a quick moment just to tell me, I know your career is extensive, but I would like to know maybe a little bit about where you got started, and, we'll just go from there.
Awesome. Well, I mean, wow, that's quite a history to dive into.
I know it's extensive.
I basically, grew up in Los Angeles, California. I moved there from Denver when I was about 6 years old. And to be honest with you, I could always remember singing. I don't think it really hit the forefront of my memory until I was probably about 9, because that was when it really kind of took over my life as far as always listening to music consistently and writing down the lyrics of my favorite songs and singing along to them, burning the Pointer Sisters record, down to its warping and me having to find a new copy for my father kind of thing. We Are Family and Chick on the Side and all of these different, kinds of artists,
yeah.
Aretha Franklin, The Temptations. I kind of ripped through my father's record collection at a fairly early age. And I could always remember, kind of just singing in my room and making mixtapes and, doing things that kids do, outside of playing with my friends. I spent a lot of time alone. I was always, a little bit more of an introvert, kind of growing up. And
really? You an introvert? You're so energetic on stage.
Yeah, I mean, that's different. You take on a different personality when you're performing for people, in a setting where you kind of have to entertain them in that way. And I think that's actually where I kind of found my confidence as a woman, was really pushing myself to get on stage and sing in front of people, even though I was a nervous wreck internally. I still to this day can't really perform in front of small audiences. I get really nervous at, these promo shows sometimes kind of really get to me. I don't know how to act. I don't know what to do with my hands. Yeah. So it wasn't really until junior high school or maybe elementary high school that I actually did my first performance outside of my bedroom. My mother didn't even know I could sing. I should throw that out there. She didn't even really know that I could sing until I'd done this talent show. At, every year they would throw a talent show at my school. And I decided I was going to be in the dance troupe with some girlfriends, and we did our own choreography. And I was in the fashion show. So stealing stuff out of my mom's closet because none of the stuff that I wore I really liked because I used to dress like a boy and I love my mom's clothes. So I used her stuff to do the fashion show, but then I ended up singing as well. And there was a song by this group called En Vogue that was really huge female singing group when I was coming up, and I sang a song called "Just Can't Stay Away" a cappella.
Nice.
I didn't know anybody that actually played music at my school. Like I wasn't in the band class or anything like that, so I just kind of did it on my own, and I ended up getting this like standing ovation, which was when you're that age, you don't know whether or not it's genuine or if it's just because like, oh, little girl, like sang in front of the whole school and it's so cool. So you don't know if it's just that kind of thing. But I kept doing it, as I was, kind of like coming up, I would be asked to sing at the assemblies or, to participate in the next talent show because of this, and that. And that kind of followed me throughout all of my schooling. It was something that I carried into high school. I always, just did it. I didn't really think about it like, I want to pursue this myself. I was always really asked and I never said no. And I think that's something that kind of really shaped my career as well, because with every opportunity that I'd gotten, it literally had been kind of a word of mouth thing. Someone hearing that, I was a great singer, a great performer or something. And, someone would hit me up and, want me to do something for like their demo that they were doing or, perform with them at one of their shows. And not necessarily like a backup thing. It would be like, hey, can you sing lead on this one track or, stuff like that. So that's kind of always how it has been for me. I never really had the experience of having to chase anything, but I was always down to do things. And I worked my butt off to make sure that it was perfect. I think one of the foundations for me and continuing and to like getting into Fitz was actually one of these opportunities that I had gotten in college where I studied music, but I didn't necessarily want to be the person. Like I wasn't trying to be the artist. I was like really more interested in the actual business side of things. So I studied music business and I studied popular songwriting.
Nice. Where did you go to school, by the way? I'm sorry to interrupt. Where did you go to school?
I actually went to a community college in Pasadena after dropping out of Berkeley.
Whoa.
I dropped out of school and I went to the city college near my house where my parents were living. And just kind of like fell into doing different creative things. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life as far as a career was concerned. I was always somebody that was motivated by the legalities of things. Like I loved reading contracts and trying to understand the language and the numbers. That stuff kind of just stood out to me. It made sense to me. But also with songwriting, because when I was in my bedroom, when I was a kid, me constantly writing down the words of songs and learning them and, like learning the science behind writing something and why it resonates with people's spirits and their emotions. That was something that I was always really interested in. So I took that into, going into this, JC situation. I studied popular songwriting. There was a gentleman by the name of Joey Gallo, who was a songwriter with a company called Rondor Music for many years.
Nice.
And he was our professor. And, I really enjoyed being in his class because he gave the way that he explained music made it really, gave it a clear vision. When you walk into a room and you're writing something with the intent of it becoming a commercial kind of thing, not necessarily to like, people get this bad taste in their mouths when you talk about commercial music, but this is the thing that puts food on the table as an artist, so
True.
when you think about it maybe hitting on a massive scale or doing it as a professional, there is an approach that you take. You know, there is a point A to point B to writing a song. So when you're thinking about pop song arrangements, you're thinking about your A, B's and, you know, A, B, and C sections and how you write them and this consistency of feeling that you hear throughout the song. And something that really stood out to me is he always explained popular songwriting as having a wheel of feeling. And I always found that fascinating because that's something that I always found interesting about not just pop music, but hip hop.
Yeah.
Which became a big part of my life in college. It was the way that the MC would rhyme. You know, there was always a cadence. There was always kind of this underlining melody that made the song really catchy.
Yeah.
But also gave them the ability to stand out as artists. So everybody had their own flow, you know.
Yeah.
You talk about artists that I actually ended up working with, you know, around that period of time too, you know, artists like Evidence from Dilated Peoples. He's known as Mr. Slow Flow. He has this really interesting, like, slow cadence into the way that he rhymes. And you can tell a Dilated track with Evidence on it within like the first like 3 bars of the song. So, you know, that was something that I really found fascinating. And I was able to kind of like carry into wanting to pursue music further, you know, like
yeah.
I started allowing myself to kind of sing in front of my friends. And, you know, I got this one opportunity. I was hanging out with a bunch of like hip hop dudes in college. And I remember them like being in the studio and they played this record that I was really familiar with when I was a kid because my father used to play it and I couldn't place who the artist was. But I started singing along to the track. And it was the first time I'd ever let anybody hear my voice, you know.
So really?
Like, yeah.
I find that so hard to believe.
Yeah, like I said, like in college, it was like we would do like the demos and stuff. So obviously, like the people that were in my class knew that I could sing, but I wasn't trying to take it any further than that. Like I wasn't collaborating with anybody unless it was part of the curriculum. It was really a personal journey for myself to kind of figure out what it was for me that resonated, you know, like really stood out for music for me, you know, like it's something that I'm really going to pursue, or do I want to just pursue the avenue of the publishing industry and be able to find talent and help other artists do, you know, things that Beyonce's doing? Like, can I be that person, or should I be the girl that's trying to be Beyonce?
So if I can just like chime in a second. So for you, when it comes to singing, obviously you're natural, in my opinion, and you obviously knew that you could sing. So at the time when you were exploring your ability to sing, were you always constantly thinking about it in that business side? Like, because I understand as a musician, you know, a lot of the times you try and play as much as you can, or, you know, and I'm speaking as myself as a drummer. You know, if there was a band happening, I wanted to jump in as much as I could, you know, but it seems to me that you were very much thinking in advance all the time. Like you were very much like, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to be the one who's finding artists? And like you were basically saying, is that the reason primarily why you weren't mostly singing, is because you were trying to figure out where you wanted to take either one?
That's it. That's exactly it. I think part of it was, you know, and thank you for that compliment with my voice. Like, I never really loved my singing voice. Like, really? I knew I could sing, obviously, because, you know, other people liked it. But like when I would hear it back, it sounded strange to me. You know, like there was always something that wasn't quite like what I'd heard with all of the other singers that I'd, you know, ever sang to, or, you know, like I was like, I didn't have that voice. So for me, it wasn't something that I felt would be a marketable kind of thing, you know, and I didn't think that I could sell records with my voice, but I could definitely sell records with my songs, you know?
Yeah.
So I think I had more confidence in being a lyricist and becoming a better songwriter and then like exploring working with other people, you know? I think my path obviously was supposed to be something different. And because, like I said before, like I never really said no to things. Like I really allowed myself to have experiences, even if it wasn't something that I was chasing, you know?
Is that common among singers? And I say this because I have a lot of friends who are singers, and I hear this a lot. People are like, ooh, I don't like the way that sounds when I sang that, or I wish my voice sounded more like this. And obviously you've been very successful, but I'm curious, do you feel like that's something that's very common amongst your peers?
I think so. I mean, I've spoken to some people where I've heard, them do a live set, and I thought they sound amazing, and they come up and they're like, I sounded like SHIT, and I'm like, what? So I think we all have that. I think what happens is when you're dealing with your own consciousness and how you hear something in your head, and it doesn't necessarily come out the way that you
heard
thought
it
was in your mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's what makes that experience happen for us. It's this perfection that we hear, that we see in our imagination, and it's just this beautiful dream that we have, but that's not always the case when it comes out. You know what I mean? It's easier to manipulate the instrument, but not as easy to do with your own voice, because we all hear our own voices differently.
Yeah.
I may think that I have this kind of alto sounding speaking voice, and it's like butter when it comes out. But when I hear it on tape, it sounds not like that. It sounds high pitchy to me.
Oh man,
these different tonalities that I'm not hearing, when they come out. Obviously, I'm not tone deaf or anything like that, but you just hear a different thing. And I think that's what most singers, like myself, do have. I still don't know a singer to this day. Like, we can listen to a song and think yeah, that song nailed it.
Yeah.
It's a mixing thing, at the end of it. It's like, how was that mixed? Or, what was that recorded through? What was that mic like? Oh yeah, I like that. That really makes my voice sound really nice. And you work really hard to get to those points.
So would you say that when it comes to, as we're kind of going through this topic, because I'm a drummer, so I can't sing to save my life. I can match pitches, but I can't sing a song to save my life. But I can definitely relate when it comes to certain things that I have to play, whether in sessions or live, where you hear, for example, for me, you hear a fill, then you play it, and then it just doesn't come out as smooth as you want it, and you got to fix it, after post or whatever. So I'm curious, in what we hear on the radio, or just in general, how much do you feel is actually natural and improvised and fully produced? And by that I mean when we hear, let's say, your song, right, or any other pop singer song, and we hear wow, that is an amazing line, right? How much do you feel that it's produced versus it being this is how it was originally intended to sound like?
I mean, with technology right now, I'm not even exactly sure if there are that many one takes anymore.
Yeah.
You got to think back in the early, music periods of even just thinking about Motown and Stax, how things were recorded. They were recorded to tape. So you were getting exactly what came out. And if anybody messed up, then you had to start all over again, and you had to splice that thing. So there's always been some form of editing, but I think the pure organic sound of music, to be honest with you, doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist in the way that, it was being done when I was growing up, or the records that I listened to, just because the technology has, exploded to make those situations so much more easy, so you can do, in a session, as you can do 5 different takes, and you can basically splice them all together within 2 minutes, and you can make it sound like it's one seamless take that was done and, never sought after again, and sometimes you do get lucky. Sometimes the demo take is the take that you end up using in the final version of a song too. There's something to be said about the impulse singing and that natural emotion that comes out the very first time you sing a song, versus, one that you've practiced and or you cut 5 different comps for, and you got that one amazing take out of 5 different comps. Somebody like Pink, for instance, I feel like maybe it's just in my head, and maybe it's stuff that I've heard about her, is she is a one take girl. She
Really?
walks into that room And I'm not, you know, and obviously, like, I've never worked with her. I would love to work with her. But, you know, I've heard things that she can just walk in the booth, sing the damn song, and that's the take that they use, you know, because she is that good. And then there's other people that are just not that way, you know, singing is an emotion like anything, you know, you can go into the room and you're not feeling completely motivated.
Yeah.
And stuff comes out on tape, and sometimes it takes you 10 times to actually feel the song that you're singing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, I think with technology today and the ability to kind of just, you know, take the easy way, you know what I'm saying? Like, take the easy way, versus like really, really nailing the song the very first time. I'm not exactly sure if that exists for anyone anymore. You know?
Can I ask you this? Like, do you feel like, obviously technology has just changed the way we do things in general. Like, I mean, there's no really going back to the way things were, but do you find yourself like preferring that systematic approach where you like you said, you basically take a couple takes and you just choose the best one that comes out of that? Obviously there's no problem with that. Or do you find yourself trying to strive to be more like, you know what, I want to try and get it in as little takes as possible so that, you know, it's the real me, or I'm not sure how you want to put it, but does that make sense? Like, do you prefer one or the other?
When I go in, I definitely try to do the least amount of takes as possible. You know, it's not always that way. You know, sometimes the emotion of the song doesn't come to me in the beginning. It takes a little while to really hone into the words, especially if I've written the song that day and I haven't sat with it. I'm always trying to go for the best take, and sometimes to the exhaustion of myself, you know, because it's different when you're recording. And sometimes that very first, you know, the very first few takes are the ones you end up using, obviously, because by the time you get to the like seventh one, you know, that you don't feel is perfect, ends up being the one where you're actually exhausted, and it's coming through on the record and stuff like that. So, you know, I prefer to do as little takes as possible, especially if it's, you know, if it's an easy part, if it's like literally just a verse and I'm singing the chorus and stuff, which is, you know, often how it is with Fitz stuff, because, you know, I'm the co-lead on it. You know, it's a lot easier to do that. But when you're singing lead on something and you really want to convey the emotion behind the words, it just depends, man. It's, you know, it's like the emotion of the song. You know, it either touches you at that moment or it doesn't.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you're very honest about that, because as an artist, any kind of artist, it doesn't matter whether it's music or whatever it is, you know, it's so easy to get very critical about your own work, whether it's the first take, the second take, whatever it is. It's very easy to fall into that mindset of like, oh God, I'm just not doing it right this time. But to be honest with yourself and say, you know, I'm just going to keep doing it until I get it right. I mean, I think that's what it takes. Yeah.
That's what it does. I mean, you know, that's with anybody. I think with this whole technology thing and you know, the ease at which one can create songs nowadays, it has made people lazy. You know, something to be said about those artists like Beyonce, like Pink, like Prince, like Michael Jackson, who really worked towards what they're trying to put out on record. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think any of those songs have come easily for any of them, because they're creating art. You know, they created art. Where you listen to a lot of other new things that are out, and it's not to take away from their work, because, you know, obviously they've worked to get to where they are, but you don't hear it in the quality of the music that's coming out of them, you know, and you can tell the difference. You can really tell the real from the fake pretty quickly.
Yeah. Can I ask you something? Can you give me an example of what you think is like a very real performance and a very fake performance, and like something that you've heard recently? And I know it's kind of like randomly on the spot. I was just curious if maybe you knew.
I mean, if I were going to talk about like a pop record, and you know, this is just me going off of what I've heard in comparison to stuff. It's like, I'm going to use Taylor Swift as an example.
Okay.
I'm not kidding. You know, I feel like maybe she had a really hard time figuring out what she really wanted to do and what she wanted to convey on this new record. Whereas her last record, which I thought was phenomenal, you know, I felt the songs, she was 1,000% in them. She had nothing to prove. You know, I feel like maybe this record, she spent a lot of time worrying about how she was going to convey that she didn't give a fuck what people thought about her. And that's all that came out on the album for me, is what she thinks people think about her. Whereas the last record, she didn't have to prove shit. She's really talented. And that came out in the songs, you know, even the songs that I didn't love, you know, I thought that they were real. I could connect to them. I love the songwriting. The production was insane.
Yeah.
The matter was really cool. It was varied. It wasn't just about one thing. And, you know, that record exploded for her. And, you know, I wasn't as inspired on this new record because I felt like maybe she was, you know, dealing with needing to get something out to prove the world that, you know, she's this and this and that. She didn't need to do that.
Do you feel like, though, that most artists, when they get to a certain point, it doesn't matter like who it is, and again, it doesn't even matter like what field of art it is, but I do feel like there's a pattern when you get to a certain pinnacle of success or a certain point, a milestone, there is a lot of pressure that comes with that. And I do see a pattern where a lot of artists try to prove themselves. Do you feel like that's something that most artists have to go through?
Yeah, 1,000%. 1,000%. I mean, you wish that you didn't. You wish that the business side and like, you know, especially when you start getting into a situation where the label is way more involved and your team's way more involved and you have the agents you know what I mean? Like there's like these things that have to be plotted and planned for your ability to put food on the table. I think that does, you know, come into the play of the creative realm, but I think it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to say, fuck all that and create the art that you want to create. And you hope, like every other record before, that it's going to resonate with the audience or it's going to reach further. You know, it's going to go past the audience that you already have. You know, I think with a lot of artists, when we start getting into this place, I mean, because obviously Fitz, we've done that too. We've had those moments. This last record that we wrote, you know, that we worked on together, it was not the way that it was on the second record. It did not come with ease. There was a lot of, you know, stress that was involved in getting that record done and a lot of elements that we weren't used to going in with creating the record and, you know, various life changes and stuff like that.
Like what kind of elements?
Life stuff, you know, people having kids and
growing up,
moving to different states and, you know, just like growing. I would call it growing pains, even though we're all grown up, you know, those life changes do shift and sometimes your focus is not on the creative part of it. You know, you're at that point when you start adding additions into your life that you're responsible for, it does start to kind of take over the aspect of art versus being able to put food on the table. Because if this single doesn't hit, then we got to write another record. You know what I mean? Or all of these things, there's variables that are involved when you're dealing with life in a career that is just your art. You know, you have to kind of find the balance. And I give kudos to somebody, say, like Bruno Mars, you know, when I talk about courage. When they did that record, he didn't play the album for anybody. His A&R didn't hear it. He had just fired his management. Like there were so many things variables that happened with that process of that album. And the fact that this dude just sweeped the Grammys with this record,
I know,
was going to do great because he decided to do something that was conceptual, that didn't sound like anything else, that didn't sound like his previous stuff. He went back to an era of music that I was listening to on the radio when I was 10. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
he went back to that period of music and he took a risk and it worked for him from his peers' standpoint. Did it hit on radio the way that they wanted to? Not until like the second single. The first single didn't do as well as they wanted it to.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter because it went all over the world. And obviously he's Bruno Mars. He can do whatever the fuck he wants as long as he's writing great songs, you know?
Yeah.
But I think that took a lot of courage for him. And I'm sure that he had a lot of doubts within himself. Like, am I doing the right thing? And like, I didn't get the number one, like, this is a failure. You go through those moments, but I think when you get the accolades from your peers, when you get things like sweeping the Grammys when no one thought you were going to, when that happens, that has to be such an amazing feeling of gratification that you followed your heart and you created your art and you did what you wanted to do and it paid off.
And it's one of those stories that like inspire people for ages to come. And I'm glad that you bring that up because it's something that always fascinates me. And we all as artists go through all the fucking time. Like it's so easy to sit there and be like, wow, Bruno Mars, he released that album without showing it to his team, which is a huge, huge deal. I don't even think people realize how big of a deal that is. And then just to have it be number one, like it could have easily not been number one. You know what I mean? But the point being is he didn't know it was going to be number one. He had to sit there with himself and trust what he was about to put out. Basically trust everything that he did, all that music inside his head. And like you said, all those negative thoughts, all the doubts like, oh, what if this does not work? What if it's the worst thing I ever do? Even like bringing Taylor Swift into it. What if it would have been something like that? It's like he had to trust his gut to the fullest to put that out.
Yeah. I mean, we had to do the same. Our third record, like I said, it was a really difficult process. There was a lot of writer's block that happened in the early stages. There was a lot of exhaustion that happened, creative exhaustion that happened during the process of that record. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into this album. And before it was released, it was, I think for some of us, especially me, I can really speak with myself. Are we going too far right? Is this really Fitz in the Tantrums? What are we doing here? And then I had to go back and listen to the songs again and say, you know what? This is Fitz in the Tantrums for 2000, whatever, the 15, 16s on.
Yeah.
And so we've grown out and to moving into something else, which is something that we've done with every single one of our albums. We've always pushed forward. We've always never tried to allow ourselves to be pigeonholed into being a throwback band. Our very first record was Motown inspired. It was, that blue-eyed soul, British, kind of soul stuff.
Yeah.
That's what the sound was. And then when we moved into, doing More Than Just a Dream, we were pushing away from the 60s, getting, a little bit more into our 80s things that, we grew up with, most of the guys had grown up with, and those sounds, and really modernizing and perfecting what we could do as a band and what inspired us, the amount of time that we spent on touring, the experiences with the call and response with the audiences and all of these things. Those are the inspirations that we poured into, that album. Coming off of Picking Up the Pieces and then getting into this record, it became like, wow, life is really changed for us. We have different wants, new babies, there's new things, on the horizon. How are we going to keep this process going, but even push it further? Because we're going to need this to keep pushing further. We can't stay in the same place. Because, in the sense of the business world, it's going to get exhausted to stay in the same place. Like we're never going to be able to financially grow and, think about doing other things outside of just touring all the time, and other projects and other things that we want to do in our careers. So those variables did go into, the process of this record when we were thinking about things like, how are we going to really push it forward? So there was that fear, is this totally going to fall flat on its face or is it going to do well? And luckily for us, it did really well. We sold more records than ever with this last album. We had more streaming on this record, the balances of the licenses and everything still continued with More Than Just a Dream and this album, so we've been able to have a commercial success, even with all those variables and all those doubts that went in the beginning of the process. But, we created something that was for us at this time. And, I'm really looking forward to getting into this, this fourth record because, wow, at this point, we've been together for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
And the fact that we've been able to do it this long and we're still friends. And, every band has its problems. Obviously, we're married to each other. We're going to consistently, have our things the way that it's handled and the way that we can talk to each other. We all genuinely respect each other as musicians and as human beings. And we laugh together and we have a good time. We love each other's families and, we look out for each other. And I think that's really what makes, a band stay together is that ability to kind of say, hey, if we have a problem, let's come together and work it out. And be adults and, talk to each other and not let the outside elements become part of the internal workings of what makes this band great.
Let me ask you this, for the business side of things, with like the label and all these things, are there any things like on the outside world, like the business world that ever, try and get in between of what the band currently is? Because like you said, 10 years for anything, especially for a band is incredible. I mean, the Eagles lasted for like what, 6-7 years, something like that. And you guys have already pushed way past that. And so I guess I'm curious, like, if do you see like a lot of the business elements of the industry trying to sort of kind of like push in between what the band is and trying to change you guys constantly into something that you guys are not?
I think my perspective on business and music creativity is quite different because of my background and the understanding of this is a business that we are in. So obviously there are going to be external elements that are involved in the process that you may not necessarily agree with at the beginning, unless you have a complete understanding of what the business is. I think for me, sometimes, with new people that get involved with the project, they're super excited, but they may not exactly know what the brand is, so you have to consistently kind of remind people of what the brand of the band is and what that looks like and how it should be pushed. And and if you're going to push it in this way, make sure that it seems genuine. It doesn't seem phony, because the phony is always the shit that doesn't, actually have success.
Yeah.
So I think that part of it, and knowing when to pick your battles and knowing when to bend and fold, when you're dealing with your partners that are initially paying for, helping your success climb, They're your business partners, so it's like talking to your investors and saying to them, hey, I know you have your idea, but this is where we see things going. How can we meet in the middle so that we're not completely lost in our identity in order for you to be able to make your business successful?
I'm glad that you bring that up, because it's one of the things that a lot of people that want to get in the industry, a lot of people that have aspirations to have their band make it, to the same place where you guys have gotten, forget the fact that it is a business at the end of the day. The underlying tone of it all is that there's a huge machine that runs a lot of these musical, acts that we constantly see. And I think the fact that you guys are willing, and especially you, that you have this great understanding that it is a partnership. It's basically, like you said, an investor comes in and helps you take your brand to the next level, and you being very aware that your brand and your band, they're basically, you have to find some sort of balance between the business side and the artistic side. That's how you create a very successful act.
It's true. No artist wants to deal with it, obviously. Like, if I could just put out the first thing that I write, I would do it, in a heartbeat. But, I have to also think about how I want that music to be perceived. And if I'm okay with maybe just a couple hundred people hearing it over a few thousand or million, I think any artist, especially in the start, if you have some form of idea of where it is you want to go, it makes it a lot easier for a business to get involved with you.
Right.
Because, especially in this day and age where there's so much music, I mean, I hate to say it, singers come a dime a dozen. Whether or not they're good or not at this point doesn't even matter, because technology can make anybody sound good.
Yeah.
I think
kind of a sad truth, right?
you know, so you have to come now with more to the table than you ever had before. It can't just be, you know, I sing really well, but I have zero idea of what it is to be a star. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Some people just bleed stardom. Not everybody. A lot of us have to work at it. You know, a lot of us have to learn how to do things in order to make our personas interesting for the mass, you know, the mass population. You know, not all of us are walking, like I keep bringing up Beyonce, but she is a very clear picture of what a star looks like. That woman is a star from head to toe, but she works her butt off to be who she is, you know, and she works every day. And I think that's, you know, where artistry is right now. You know, it's not only just to be, you know, the person that's singing the song. Now it's being the person that actually can help write the song as well, or knows how to pick the song. If you were not a great lyricist, you know exactly what works well on your voice, and you know what you can sell, you know?
Absolutely.
And you know what you want to portray in the world. You know, I think a lot of people that are starting off this dream need to go beyond just the dream and have the vision at that point. Start writing things down and have a clear picture of even the musicians that you want to work with, because it's all within your brand. You're creating an identity, you know, that's outside of, you know, who you are in your bedroom. You know, you're creating something that I want to purchase, that I want to put on repeat. You know, Kendrick Lamar is amazing because he's an actual artist. He goes beyond just the hip hop part of it. He's an exemplary lyricist. He's an insanely amazing, well-read lyricist.
Yeah.
That really knows how to approach songwriting. And, you know, I'm inspired by artists like that. Like, I listen to those records from front to back. I write down the words, you know, and if nowadays I can just look it up on Google, you know.
True.
I want to know what they're saying. I want to have an understanding of what the slang is. Like Lemon, NERD's record is so good.
Yeah. Yes.
It's such a good album. And I've always loved NERD because they push the envelope of being this punk, garage, hip hop, pop band that you cannot pigeonhole, you know?
Yeah.
The words, you know, Pharrell is not the best singer, but he sounds like the Curtis Mayfield days of the 70s, you know, with that voice that he has. And it's very unique to him. And he knows how to play off of that, you know? And he's got style, and he infuses all of that into his music, you know? That's something that, you know, for me, that I like to try to do for myself. You know, it's like, I'm a very, very visual person. I've always been a very visual human being. So when I write songs, I often see the music videos that are playing out. And that's how I know the song's really good. If I can't picture some type of like imagery or how this would be performed, or like, you know, what it would look like on, you know, on your laptop screen or on your iPhone and your television and stuff like that. If I can't actually envision that, 9 times out of 10, the song is not hitting for me, you know, personally. Really? It could be a great song for someone else, but for me, it doesn't seem like it's alive until I can actually see the visual. I can see the picture. And up to this point, I've been able to do that with every single song that I've ever written with Fitz and the Tantrums. You know, I've been able to visualize the artwork, or the, you know, the way that the music video should kind of look like, or have some, you know, idea in my head of, you know, what I hope it would look like, you know.
Was there a song on one of your recent albums that it was pretty much like to the T of what you envisioned? Like, once you wrote it and you had a picture in your mind of how the music video would look like, was there a song that you actually managed to like get it to look exactly or pretty close to what you had in mind?
I would probably say The Walker. Yeah, I would probably say The Walker. You know, we when we were getting into the like kind of creative elements outside of just the music, once the record was done and we were, really getting into videos and working with the, the business partners and figuring out treatments and stuff like that, I would, send hundreds of different, like visual inspiration things from different music videos and different films and directors and production companies and stuff over, to our management and stuff. And I would say, hey, listen, like, I think it's rad that we're in our videos and stuff like that, but I think it'd be really dope to get somebody else to kind of portray the star, and this video is very hyper and, it's intense. And the person that we're writing about was an intense, character with this kind of mystery behind him. So
he was a doctor, right? I'm sorry to interrupt. He was a doctor from Silver Lake.
Yeah. So the doctor, so the song Walker is about this guy that, who was basically, I guess he was a surgeon or something, we discovered later. But before knowing who he was, as a human being, he was the Silver Lake Walker. He would walk around in these little green shorts and he had this red tan, from being out in the sun all day long.
My man, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we were like, does this guy, like, what's his deal? He was this mystery, but also like this kind of figure of what Silver Lake was, these kind of like weirdo, interesting characters,
Yeah.
And it wasn't until after he died or, when he was being investigated for, this kid's overdosing on, I think it was opiates. This kid overdosed. So he was being investigated for overprescribing of opiate, painkillers and stuff. And, when after he died, all of this stuff came out about him and, you found out that he was a doctor and, all of these things. So writing that song and having it be more about the good side of what he was, this person that walked to the beat of his own drum and like, he didn't care what people thought about him. He just did his thing every single day. But then he happened to also be this very successful surgeon,
Yeah. You never would have thought about that, right?
Uber smart and not crazy. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. Or maybe he was, who knows?
We're all a little crazy. Come on, we're artists. We're all a little crazy.
Yeah. So, like we wanted the video to kind of reflect that intensity and that mystery and the idea of walking to the beat of your own drum and what that looked like for us, and I really enjoyed the way that video came out. I thought it was super fun. It was upbeat. It had all the characters that I, had in my head as far as like, different actors kind of, showing the music and the song lyrics and having this like fun vibe to it. That was one of the ones I really loved.
Yeah, and The Walker is honestly like let me say this. One of my most favorite song from you guys is definitely Don't Gotta Work It Out or Don't Work It Out. I remember listening to that for the very first time back in college, actually, like way back when I was younger. But I do have to admit, I think More Than Just a Dream was a very, very good album. Just in general, with all the songs that you guys wrote, it was very poppy. Like you said, it was very 80s. And one of the things that stood out to me earlier in our conversation was how when you were learning about commercial songwriting, right? Your professor was emphasized on the wheels of feeling or the wheel of feelings, essentially, right? And The Walker, for example, has this very driving feeling. It's always driving, like you said. It's basically always going somewhere. Yeah. And so I'm curious that when you approach your songwriting, can you just give me like a little bit of an example of like what the wheel of feelings is? I think I kind of know what it is, but I'm just curious, like your perspective on it and maybe how you approach The Walker, like with that like wheel of feelings concept.
So, thinking about The Walker, that internal wheel is the whistle. That started off as a very simple idea, that Fitz actually had come up with. And from there, we, kind of created the beat, the which is the driving force, coming from the actual synths that are being played. And that's something that you can consistently hear throughout the song. It's something that you always kind of come back to, it's that you always come back to, the same as the whistle. The whistle is its own chorus in addition to the chorus that was written with vocals and stuff. And also another part of the wheel of feeling is the backup vocals on that song. We were going through the motions of trying to figure out how we could make the actual singing portion of that chorus stand out more. And for me, the driving force was the run, run, run to the beat of the drum. It takes a tick, 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 ding-a-ding, dong, dong, dong. And you hear that it's consistently going underneath the chorus. Oh, here we go. And that for me is part of the earworm, so it's finding these little forces that can become choruses within a chorus, whether it's, on a slow song using a xylophone for a higher pitched tone that has a steady, like, lullaby flow to it on the top line, or passive element, it's like where certain places where you can hit the kick. So if it's a 4 on the floor, why disco music was so popular was because of the rhythms. They moved to a certain time that always was repeated, so you could never forget that line. It's just the internal workings of a song, and sometimes you get that and sometimes you don't, but you work towards it, and it doesn't always have to be something that's lyrical. Obviously the chorus is the thing that, keeps the earworm in your head. So it's all about that top line and the lyrics working together to make it memorable. But there's also parts of the song that have nothing to do with the chorus that can be as memorable. So if you can kind of think about it in that way, where everything has a place where it needs to come back to, that's your wheel of feeling.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. See, to me, and again, I'm not a songwriter, but for me, like, what I thought the Wheel of Feelings was more of like you start low, then you go high, then you go back down, and then you basically like a verse, chorus kind of thing. Yeah. But it seems to me like it's more like a theme related, like you have to understand, what the vibe of the song is, and then create parts that essentially cannot necessarily repeat all the time, but it's more of like like your anchor point. Like it needs to come back to that.
It needs to come back to that point. And that can happen with every single element of the song, because they all work together. It's basically the completion of the meal. One thing I will say about hip hop music is it's wow. You listen to hip hop songs, and just the beat alone is its own wheel of feeling. It's this track, this loop that happens. So you become really familiar with the way that the rhythm is hitting, which is what makes you nod your head. You may not necessarily always remember the lyrics that are being sung, but if the rapper is good, you're going to remember the cadence. So you'll be able to sing along, even if you don't completely know all of the words, Yeah. That's what that is. That's what that emotion, that return to the starting point. That's what makes pop music great.
Yeah, and so like for example, so for let me take the song 6 a.m., which is also on your second record, another one of my favorite songs. That one's a little bit more, I wouldn't call it mellow. It's definitely a little bit not as driving in my opinion as The Walker. But for example, for 6 in the morning, like I understand that you have this like not like a hum, but it goes like, and I'm not a singer, but it goes like a do 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 do. Is that more the example of like where your anchor comes from?
Yeah, exactly. That, and the synth, and also the bass. When we were writing that song, that song actually came from just us messing around live during a sound check, and we recorded, the kind of the musical structure and stuff like that. And then Fitz and I went into his studio and started kind of working on it. And he got a little bit flustered, so I kind of took over because I had things in my head that I'd been hearing the whole time. So, I worked with Joe, who played bass on it. And then, obviously with the saxophone, it's very subtle in that song because it's matching with the bass line. I wanted them to kind of mimic each other so that create this kind of hip hop feeling to it. That song for me is like a really rad, like it would have been a dope, like hip hop song for maybe the Roots or something, like I could have heard them do that. But there's something about each of the rhythm and the saxophone and the synth. They're all kind of doing the same thing. They're kind of dancing with one another. They're all doing the same line. dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun, dun. And it goes back to the same place. It's all one big loop, that song. So then when you start getting into the actual chorus, it's 6 a.m, I'm still awake. It rides on the same rhythm.
Yeah.
So it turns to the same place. And that's something that I always kind of look at, you know, when I'm writing songs or really wanting to kind of get that hip hop soul element. It's that creating that wheel of feeling where everything kind of dances together and mimics one another.
Yeah. And you know what? I love how you explain your approach to music, because again, to me, not being a songwriter, it's amazing to me to hear that, how knowledgeable you are, and just how you know that everything that's going on. You know, it's not like you just, and again, I've worked with different people, and so I understand that there are some people that, you know, work differently, you know, but it seems to me like you're very much aware of what is exactly going on with the song that you wrote, and everything that you wrote has a specific intention, and it's what makes the song great, in my opinion.
Yeah. Thank you. Like I said, you know, it's like some songs that moment comes easy, and other times you kind of have to manufacture it. You have to, you know, the song may be this like epic fun sounding song where nothing really returns to anything. It's just this big ballad of like things that has this amazing chorus, and you're waiting to get to the chorus. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Other times the entire song is a chorus. You know, and those are the songs that I go for. I want to be able to sing every single moment of the song. I don't want to just sing the chorus, you know.
Yeah.
So, even though I do strongly also believe into don't bore us, get to the chorus. About being able to sing the entire melody, having respect for the entire top line melody that was created in a song, or singing the saxophone part, singing the guitar part. I mean, how many Guns N' Roses songs do you know? You know what I mean? Like,
oh, true.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's that standout moment where it doesn't necessarily have to be about the words you're singing, but you can still sing along. You know, I can air guitar, you know, Prince's Purple Rain.
Oh man, yes.
Clicks, because he made it so catchy. Talk about a wheel of feeling. That entire section is its own chorus. So
true. What do you think about like what about like a song like Billie Jean? Okay, and here's the thing. Like I'm a huge Michael Jackson fan. Okay, and I've heard a lot. And I wasn't there, so I don't know if this is true. But from what I read, I understand that Quincy Jones wasn't a big fan of Billie Jean's long intro, you know, but now it's a very iconic intro of just how, and I don't quite remember right now, but I believe the bass line just loops for like 8 bars.
It's incredible, and it's the catchiest thing you've ever heard.
Yeah. And that's even before like the actual like chords come in, you know, it's just like da 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 over and over for like 8 times. And then the bump comes in, bump. There's at least like what 45 seconds to maybe like a minute before any sort of like vocals actually come in. But for, you know, on paper, theoretically wise, at the time that would not have worked, but somehow Michael found a way to make it work. You know what I mean? Because what he did is he took the disco, what made disco cool back then were those long intros. So why, for me, you know, like I'd read that about Quincy too, but I think maybe he was thinking because it was so old school. That's something you wouldn't have done, or you would have only done that in the lost period of the 70s with George Benson. Right. You know what I mean? Like he was doing that kind of long thing. Like they were going for pop. They weren't going for, you know, jazz. You know what I mean? Yeah, true. Yeah. So, you know, and he did the same thing with Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. It was another. How many times was that repeated? You know? A long time. A lot of times. You know? How many times can you say, Mama say, Mama? But everybody sings that, and you can play it at the club, just that section, and everyone will keep dancing. And you know what? That's the cool part right there, is because I have also read, again, I wasn't there, but I've also read that, if Quincy wasn't a fan of like the long intros, I've read that, Michael's answer was always because, it made him want to dance. Like, he just wanted to dance, and that's what the song reminded him of. And what I love about that, Michael being another, just star, he just oozed being a star, is that he very much, with his music, he did what he wanted because he was a dancer also. Like, he wanted his music to make him dance, and so therefore his music reflected part of who he was. And that's one of the things that I respect so much of Michael's music, and other people that are very true to who they are, is that their music resonates, and that's why it works.
Yeah, no, it's true. That's why Bruno could do the record that he did. That's why we've been able to, as Fitz and the Tantrums, continue the career the way that we've done. We haven't been in a set genre. People ask me what kind of music that we do, and I'm like, well, we do pop music, but it's kind of pop alternative.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. Because of our influences. It's our second record was, did really well in the alternative population. It was seen doing shows with AWOL Nation, and we were doing things like that. That's why we can do performances with Daryl Hall, to Bruno Mars, to One Republic, because our music, the influences that we have, really do have an alternative bend to them, but they're also pop.
Let me ask you this real quick. And you're obviously a very good songwriter yourself, and you're very talented with what you write. I'm curious what that dynamic is with Michael, because I know you guys both essentially share a lot of the writing, a lot of the writing efforts. I think the whole band contributes too, if I'm not mistaken. But I know that you two are very much responsible for a lot of the things that we hear. So I'm curious, like, with your mindset and what you like to do with your Wheel of Feelings and the way you write, how does that work, or how do you work with Michael?
You know what? It depends on the song. Some songs are a bit of a struggle with us because, I've ever had those conversations where you're saying the exact same thing, but you're saying it differently, and it doesn't happen until that aha, oh, we're saying the same thing, that everything actually flows.
Yeah.
Those things, I'll use, like, I guess, like out of my league, for example. That came about after a bout of writing a really crappy song with him, the same, and I basically just went home and started thinking about other things. I wasn't thinking about us. I was thinking about pitching to a Young Giant. And, I took a song that kind of maybe sounded like Fitz as far as just like the style of drums that were being played. And, I took it from a ballad into what you heard as Out of My League, and sang it like this, kind of like what I thought like an indie rocker would sound like. And I played it for him, and Fitz was like, that's our song. I want to sing that song, and I argued with him, and I said, it's not for us. So how did, like, it was one of those situations like, I wish I would have just known this when we were in the room that day. I would have just written it then, we go through that. Sometimes I hear things differently with him singing it than he does,
Yeah.
And it's just a process of just trying things. What we've learned together is that we have to just try it. And even if we don't think that it's going to work, we just have to go with it. And he pushes me in that direction sometimes because, with my analyzing of situations, sometimes that can be a hindrance in us being able to kind of create, because I'm thinking about how it's going to be performed,
Right.
Versus just thinking about the song itself in that moment. I think like maybe I'm singing it too high for him. Is he going to hit this? And, and then it gets him to, tell me to shut up, basically, like, just try it and we'll see what works. And it often works, and then other times my battle is correct. It doesn't work, and we shouldn't have wasted our time doing it. So I think I think we push each other, and I think that's what makes this, it does make it work, Yeah. Sometimes it can be a battle. Sometimes it's really smooth. And when it's really smooth, it's great.
Yeah, and you know what? I again, being a fan and loving the music that you guys write, I think it shows. I think that good teamwork shows with the albums that you guys constantly put out, and I think it's again, to me, it's rather remarkable how much understanding you have with the artwork that you're making, because it's so easy to just kind of just be doing whatever, just kind of just be putting out whatever you want and not necessarily understand what your goal is. But to me, it seems like you understand everything about what you guys are doing, which is rare, but at the same time, it's also refreshing. You know what I mean? That Fitz is in its own category because, you guys take that time to understand what your music is, what your brand is, but you also understand what everything that you guys are doing. And I think it's just great, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, you may not necessarily know the full focus of the direction when you're starting a song, obviously, because you're starting from scratch. That's the hardest thing is, sometimes when it doesn't come, it's a MFer, it's really,
yeah.
it's like an ego bruiser, man, because, it's like 1 minute you've written the song in 20 minutes and the next song takes you 8 hours and sometimes 3 days before you actually get it right. But if you just kind of continue, and obviously you know who you are as an artist at that point, it's what you want to verbally say to people. That's the challenge there, but it's just cracking at it and going and not giving up on it.
Absolutely. And can I ask you this, and maybe I'm not allowed to know, but like for the fourth album or for the next upcoming couple of songs that you guys are going to be working on, do you have an idea or like sort of like do you know where you want to go musically? Because like you've said, every single one of your albums has kind of attacked something a little bit differently and it's changed, but it's also, it's still part of Fitz and the Tantrums, So I'm curious if you guys have like an idea or an emotional idea of where you guys want to take your music next.
I think Fitz is kind of gathering on an idea. I've been a little bit like absent in the thought of it. I've been kind of writing other things, kind of keeping my chops up and stuff like that. So I haven't actually sat down with myself and what I think that picture could look like.
Yeah.
I can't really answer that. It's super early. Like we're not even going to start going into, start jamming with each other until March. I think Fitz has a bit of an idea. I have somewhat of an idea, just kind of listening to where music is kind of going and stuff like that. And we'll see if that works for us. I definitely want to bring back elements that I really loved, in the early stages, which is, some of our hip hop nuances that we had. I would really like to kind of bring that forward in our music. Because I think, songs like 6 a.m. and Don't Gotta Work It Out and all of these things really shined because of that. So, I think that's something that I really want to bring into it, but we'll see what happens.
Awesome. And I'm pretty sure that no matter what you guys write, it's going to be incredible because you understand what it is that you're trying to convey, and your songwriting style is just, it's amazing to me. And I'm not just saying that as a fan. Okay. I actually genuinely mean that. And so Noelle, I didn't expect to talk about the stuff that we were talking about, but hey, that's actually one of the things I enjoy about doing podcasts and just talking to fellow artists is because, I love understanding what it is that, what makes you tick and how you approach your art, because everyone's different. And there's so many people out there that want to do what you're doing and that admire what you're doing, and they want to break into the industry or write a really good song or something like that. So I guess I'm just curious, in your career, with everything that you've done, if you were speaking to someone right now that really wanted to learn how to write better music, write better songs, and basically put themselves in the situation where you're at now, what would be something that you would advise them to start doing right now?
I would definitely collaborate with different people that are really solid in what they're doing. If you're a songwriter, say in Nashville, that is trying to become a really great, songwriter in the realm of the country music realm. Don't just write with a country writer, write with a country writer that understands pop, because those are the songs that are selling. And, and learn from their technique and learn your own technique, like figure out what really makes you amazing, top liner. Everybody kind of has a style, even if you don't think that you do. Everybody has a style in the way that they approach music because of what they listen to. So if you're inspired by somebody that is like, I don't know, who could I think of right now, outside of country music, or if you were like a Brett Eldredge kind of person. I don't know, like he writes for himself because there's so many different songwriters out here. But if you're somebody that can write a Brett Eldredge song because that's who you listen to all the time, and you can actually do it, it kind of opens a world for you to kind of create your own craft that you're known for as a songwriter. Yeah. Amy Wadge is an amazing songwriter who's written for everybody from Ed Sheeran to Camila Cabello. And I always know her songs because of the way that the lyrics are written. She has a very particular way, and the way that she writes lyrics, and it's super poetic, and they're often romantic, and they're always about personal struggle. So I can always find one of her songs, even if I didn't know she was part of it. Like you kind of find your own niche, I think taking the elements of your character into a writing room and being able to bounce your creative input in with someone else's force is what makes a really great song. I think that's what makes the balance. It's like with me and Fitz, we are the yin and yang of each other. He's got his way that he looks at music and the way that he sings things, and I have mine, and they pair really well together. So you can only really find that if you collaborate with other people. And I know it's really easy to get into like, I'm going to do everything myself and I'm going to be this great, writer, producer person. And that's fine. But sometimes opportunities don't come out of you just working by yourself. It comes out of that person that may be connected to this publisher as well, or this person actually is friends with, I keep bringing up Brett Eldredge because he's the only person I can think of right now. But, like he's connected to this person, you know what I mean? And you may not even know it. So it's another way of putting yourself out there, and you learn more about yourself, and you hone into your craft, and you learn from people, and always work with people that are better than you.
So true.
Work with people that are better than you, because if you work with people that are only on your level, you're never going to grow because you don't have anyone to learn from. You're all teaching each other the same technique, so, challenge yourself, find out who you are as a writer, what makes you fucking great, and it's not always about the first song that you sell either. It's, it's really learning your personality. I know that I can't write with more than 2 people in a room if I'm collaborating. I just don't function that way. It gets a little bit too convoluted with other people's ideas. There's too many chefs in the kitchen. So for me, I walk into a room with somebody, I'm either working with just one person or I'm working with 2, another top liner like myself or a lyricist, and I'm working with a producer, or I'm working with a producer that understands how to write songs. I'm never going to really work with anybody that's like a 5-person room. I'm not interested in that. I don't function well with it.
Nice. You're very self-aware, and I think that's what honestly contributes to your success. And I definitely think that the insight that you bring to a lot of the listeners, I think it's very valuable, because I think you brought in a lot of insights that a lot of people don't usually think about. Like they make sense to me and they're like self-explanatory, but you don't normally sit there and think about the industry in that way, especially songwriting, which is a humongous art form in itself. And I think you're very self-aware of what you bring to the table. And I really hope that what you've talked about today will really help someone out there get to the next level, because that's really what the point of all this is for. And I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it, Noelle. You're absolutely amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Noelle. I say this at the end of every episode. It's become kind of like my tagline, but I'm always learning from my guests. It's why I do this. I love learning from people that are just killing the game. And frankly, one of the things that I'm very impressed with Noelle is that she understands the business side of the music industry. And I'll speak for myself. I understand the business a little bit, but it's not something I dive into all the time. I focus on playing drums and doing this podcast, but I can only imagine that understanding this business is really what gave Noelle a competitive edge over other people that don't. And she also worked with people, collaborated with people that were better than her, which helped her get more confident and understand her craft. So if there's anything to take away from this episode, definitely it's those two. Understand the industry that you're in and find better people to work with. Whoever you see or whoever you feel is better than you in killing the game and you want to learn from them, definitely have the guts to approach them and work with as many people as you can. That's how you build up your chops. Thanks again for joining in on the episode. If you liked what you heard, definitely press the subscribe button because trust me, this year I've got lots of great interviews, and I mean tons of great interviews coming your way.